Welcome into another edition of the LSU Sports Insider podcast. Today is Thursday, January the 16th. I'm Zach Ewing, joined today by Wilson Alexander, Scott Rabalais, and Koki Riley. And they are both members of the Advocates Crack LSU coverage team. And today's entrance in a great debate we're going to have. We're calling it Around the Horn style, although I don't have the clicker to give everybody points. I kind of wish I did. But we are going to debate what Notre Dame's appearance in the college football playoff title game means for Brian Kelly. Obviously, Brian Kelly left Notre Dame 3 years ago, really to everyone's great surprise, left for LSU. I thought I can go win a national championship at LSU easier than I could at Notre Dame. And here we are 3 years later. Notre Dame is playing Monday night for a national title, and LSU obviously is not. So before we take a break and launch into the debate, just real quick, what is your thesis statement for your position? We'll start with you, Wilson.
My thesis statement would be that this is something that doesn't necessarily, I think, ratchet up the pressure anymore on Brian Kelly, but he's going to have to win here pretty soon and at least get LSU into these sorts of games that Notre Dame is playing in order to validate the reasons that he gave for coming to LSU in the first place and for leaving Notre Dame. You know, he said that, and it certainly gave the impression that he, like you said, came here because the one thing that he didn't have in his career, a very accomplished career, was a national championship. And the last 3 LSU coaches won national titles. There's a very recruital base. There are a lot of advantages that LSU has for competing for national titles in football. And Brian Kelly now here soon needs to be closer to that than he has been the last 3 years. Especially that the spotlight just gets put more on that because the school that he left is now playing in a game that he has not been to yet as the coach at LSU.
Okay. Koki, what about you?
I don't want to phrase this as a total failure on the part of Brian Kelly in the fact that, Notre Dame's in the national championship game and it could potentially win it all. And LSU hasn't really come close to that so far in his tenure here. But I think even if they lose on Monday, it definitely ratchets up the pressure, at least nationally, maybe not as much locally, because I feel like there's been a lot of pushback against this sort of national narrative, but at the very least nationally, if not locally as well. There's just naturally going to be more pressure on him. And I think it's fairly just given the teams that Notre Dame has beaten leading up to this national championship game, and the fact that, Brian Kelly has all these, quote unquote recruiting advantages that he's talked about when he first took the job here. And yet he hasn't gotten as far as the place that he was at, where he sort of criticized for some of the not just recruiting advantages, but some of the other financial disadvantages they had compared to, LSU and the SEC and whatnot. So we'll dive into the specifics, but I definitely think that, this should create just more pressure for Kelly moving forward.
All right. And finally, Scott Rabalais.
I think it creates more external pressure for Brian Kelly. I don't think internally with the people who matter the most, and that's obviously Athletic Director Scott Woodward and President William Tate and the LSU board. I think overall, while they're not thrilled, no one's thrilled with the first 3 years on Kelly. They can't be upset. They can't feel like they have to start looking around or anything like that. I don't think it's that kind of internal pressure. But yeah, it's something that people are going to point to, and it could potentially be something that is used against LSU on the recruiting trail. Hey, they're not going anywhere. They're spinning their wheels under him. You should come to school XYZ or whatever. But I think Kelly's first 3 years has been far from a failure. I think they've had some things to overcome that Marcus Freeman has not had to overcome at Notre Dame, thanks to Brian Kelly. And I don't think, as is often the case, as I've seen before, he's not getting any of the credit for leaving Freeman a very stable, well-run, a talent-rich program, and that's okay. But I just think it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison.
All right, so that kind of frames the debate, and we're going to get into it in just a minute. First, I want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by Waste Pro. Tiger fans, if you're planning a tailgate or event, keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention the LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. We're going to take a quick break and be back, and we will really kick this off in just a minute.
Experience the convenience and cleanliness that Waste Pro brings to Mardi Gras, LSU tailgates, and festivals with our top-notch portable toilet services. Perfect for large crowds and community events. Join the countless satisfied families and organizers who trust Waste Pro to keep their gatherings spotless and sanitary. Discover more about our services and make your next event a success at wasteprousa.com.
All right, welcome back. And I guess we'll start it with this. What I'm hearing from you guys in your opening statement is that Brian Kelly, the issue for him with Notre Dame having this much success without him is a publicity problem more than anything else. People around the country, national talking heads are so, oh, look, Brian Kelly couldn't get it done. Marcus Freeman can. What has Brian Kelly done at LSU? It's not necessarily an indictment of his job in Baton Rouge. It's more of a publicity problem. But I'll leave this open for any of you. How much of a problem is a publicity problem?
I'd say it's a problem because it's about fan perception, right? And fan perception, and a lot of those fans are also donors. And if the donors aren't willing to pay the checks every single year, then you're in trouble as a coach. So, or you're in trouble as an athletic director, one or the other. So I do think, public perception is just a natural part of this job. I'd say it probably affects college sports even more than pro sports, where it just really comes down to an owner's will, right? Because they're controlling all the puppet strings, while you have a little more say in the matter, especially in the era of NIL and the transfer portal, when you're a fan and you're actually in some, and now it's even more than some. People are sort of contributing to their favorite team's success financially. So I definitely think it matters.
Yeah, perception is reality to a large degree, and Koki's right. It's I think it's more tendency or likelihood of things snowballing one way or another. If you're winning, people want to give more more money and to the program and support the program more, and then that begets more winning that you can do to help attract more players. And if you're not, then people are like, I'm not giving you another dime. Eventually they're gonna be like, I'm not giving you another dime to get rid of that guy, whoever that is, or whatever sport we're talking about. I'm not saying specifically to Brian Kelly necessarily, but yeah, it's an issue. But let's be honest, Brian Kelly had public relations issues long before Notre Dame made it to the national championship game. I mean, part of his deal is that he is not a very well liked person from his tenure at Notre Dame. He was perceived as caustic and difficult to deal with, and there are issues obviously related to the program. They had the kid who died going up on the scissor lift at practice in the high winds, and all these things, and just people have made up their minds about Brian Kelly. It's kind of like Kim Mulkey. They're like, either you like him or you don't, and a lot of people don't, and I think that's something that's followed him into LSU. Although I think he's mellowed somewhat in his time at LSU, but it's still a problem for him in terms of the perception that I don't think any amount of winning necessarily going to is going to shake, and especially when people, it's very telling when people say Notre Dame's a more likable program now or something like that. I mean, it's like, okay, there's still the pretentious, we think we invented college football program that they were long before Brian Kelly got there. But nonetheless, it's an issue that that he's got to deal with, and I don't know how much he cares. I'd love to hear Wilson's insights on that. I don't know how much he cares or he notices or it bothers him, but he's got to know it's out there.
I don't really know how much he truly, honestly cares about it one way or another. But either way, I think you should just embrace being the heel. If that's the thing that's out there. The thing with money right now, though, I'll just say, at this current moment, yes, it is true that in general, winning is going to lead to more donations. And people are going to want to see that sustained. But we've seen an uptick in the fundraising that LSU football has gotten here over the past 2 months or so. Ever since Brian, on the heels of an 8-4 season, then saying, "Hey, we need more money." Basically, that was the gist of the message, and that LSU has been now promoting that and more money that's going to the NIL collective to try to, create this transfer portal class. And LSU now has one of the top transfer portal classes in the country, and so I would refute that just a little bit. That at least at this current moment, sometimes losing can actually cause action. And I think that it maybe has in this case, at least as it relates to LSU's roster and the additions in the transfer portal that have been made. And that's really what's going to matter for this team moving forward is, does that work next season? Because it really sets up in 2025 for LSU is already a pretty critical year coming off of what they did this past year in Brian Kelly's third season. And I think maybe the thing with Notre Dame being in the playoff and now in the national championship game is it just sort of ratchets that up. It's like, okay, there's this measuring stick out there that at this current moment you're further ahead than you, and you need to catch up. You need to do it really, at least show strides towards that and significant ones next season.
I agree with Wilson that sometimes losing can help your fundraising efforts in this scenario where you have a couple successful seasons, you take maybe a half step back from the first 2 years, and then Brian Kelly has enough public sway still to say that, oh, we need a little bit more money so we can get over the hump here and take a step or two forward instead of a half step or two back. And I think people bought into that message, and it makes sense given that 2 10-win seasons, a win over Alabama, there was enough good things happening to where you could buy into, oh, we just need a little bit more money. And I'm not just saying that's true or not. I'm just saying that's maybe what happened here. The only question now is that if they keep on stalling or taking even a half step back from even starting next year, when does that sort of drive to believe in the project and just keep on sending more money, when does that stop, right? Because at some point you can't just keep on going to the well if you're not producing results. So that's going to be the thing to watch over the next year or two, really.
Yeah, definitely. You can't sustain that long term.
2 things. One is that I think every school in the country is asking its donors for more money right now. We're in that sort of era. So I don't think that LSU is unique in that aspect of it. Now, the fact that the donors are responding is still good news for LSU. And then the other point is that, and Wilson, you touched on this, winning cures everything. Like Brian Kelly only has to care about what people think about him if he's not winning. If he's winning, people don't care about the fact that Notre Dame's also winning. People don't care about the fact that there was this accident at Notre Dame. People don't care about the Southern accent he seemed to suddenly have when he got to Baton Rouge. Like nobody talks about that stuff if you're winning. And I think that that's always been Brian Kelly's biggest shield. And so to your point, the point is, whether this happened or not, next year is the time that he's got to win.
Yes, no, exactly. I mean, he's got to get it together here soon. Because I'd like that you put that winning as a shield, because that, like Rab said, that's always been, especially I think since he got to Notre Dame, the perception of Brian Kelly is sort of this red-faced, yelling a lot, and that it hasn't really, especially nationally, been accepted. And but it didn't. I still feel like that winning didn't just cover up any of that, or didn't just make it not matter. It didn't change people's opinions necessarily. But yeah, you have a shield when you're winning, and right now that shield is a little bit fractured, and so they got to put it back together.
Yeah, you don't have to care about that.
Yeah, and you can see sort of the cracks in the shield when the team he left to come here for is in the national championship game, and that's why we're here having this conversation. So how much those cracks matter and how much we should analyze into that is kind of why we're here today.
Well, let's not forget, he got his team Notre Dame to the national championship game. He got him in the playoff semifinals in the CFP 2 other times. He got him in the championship game in the BCS era when it was only the top 2 teams. Now they got blown out in all those games. I won't say, I won't pretend that they weren't. And Alabama. I was at the game when Alabama crushed them in Miami, and I thought LSU or Georgia or maybe 1 or 2 other SEC teams could have done the same thing. Notre Dame was that outclassed, but they didn't get there. And I will point out, Notre Dame under the old system would not have made the playoff this year either. They would not be anywhere in the national championship game because they were number 5 in the final rankings. They would have been left out.
Yeah, it's a good point, and a good thing to remember. Fans, today's show is brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic, your trusted healthcare provider in the heart of Baton Rouge. Whether you're in need of primary care, specialist services, or urgent care, the Baton Rouge Clinic has you covered with a team of dedicated and experienced professionals. Visit BatonRougeClinic.com to learn more or to schedule your appointment today. The Baton Rouge Clinic, caring for generations. The other aspect of this, and you touched on it a little bit, Rab, and so we'll start with you. Like, Brian Kelly probably needs to get more credit than he has for what Notre Dame has done. And I'm not trying to take away what Marcus Freeman has done. I think everyone would agree he's had a fantastic season. He's getting looks from NFL teams. I mean, like, he is the hot thing in the coaching circles right now. But like, this is just an example, but Notre Dame's probably their 2 best players is defensive tackle Riley Mills and safety Xavier Watts, who are both All-American type defenders. They were both Brian Kelly recruits. They both, now Marcus Freeman was able to keep them. But I think that's just serves the larger point here that Brian Kelly probably deserves some credit for building what looks like at least a national runner-up team at Notre Dame.
Yeah. I think that's we're so much prisoners of the now, especially in sports, right? When it comes to sports, and just focus on, hey, Marcus Freeman is doing this job and he's got them in this game. And no one remembers the fact that they lost to Northern Illinois back in September, and ran off this long winning streak just to get here. So, kudos to him. He has done a good job, but he started from a much higher starting point than Brian Kelly started at LSU. You can say, well, LSU had only won the national championship in 2019, and Kelly came here, going into the 2022 season. That's true, but the program had eroded a lot in those last 2 years under Orgeron. They were combined, help me out, Wilson, 11 and 12. In those 2 years. So the program eroded a lot. Of course, we know all the story, less than 40 scholarship players the last time they were in the Texas Bowl to end the 2021 season. And so he's had to build it up. And there have been some fits and starts. There have been some progress and some good moves in hires and some good moves in recruiting and some that have not. And obviously having to fire your entire defensive staff as he did after the 23 season is a problem. But overall, he left Freeman a program that was much more stable, much more established at Notre Dame, had 5 straight seasons of 10 wins or more. When Kelly left, they were number 5 in the CFP rankings that year. And that was another criticism of Kelly, of course, and possibly justified that he was leaving a program that was contention for the playoffs. So, Freeman has somewhat, if I may make the comparison, like Les Miles taking over from Nick Saban, has taken a program that was in good shape and just maybe gave it a tune-up. And Kelly's had to make a big overhaul, a complete overhaul here at LSU. And it's not exactly the same thing. And often the coaches who came before don't get the credit. I remember, LSU, I'm dating myself, but LSU in 2001 wins the SEC championship under Nick Saban. And he did a great job. Obviously, we know what a great coach he was. But he won with a lot of Jerry DiNardo's players, Rohan Davey, Dominic Davis, Brady James, Josh Reed, the Biletnikoff Award winner, Trev Falk. A lot of players who were recruited by Jerry DiNardo who were able to help Nick Saban get to that first championship. And that often goes unnoticed, especially if the person who is going unnoticed is not very well liked. And that's certainly the case here.
The problem with that argument, not that there isn't anything to it, but is that in the transfer portal era, rosters turn over so much that within a 3-year span in particular, even in the old model, that year 3 was when it sort of became your team, or was supposed to be. It was it's less true now because of the amount of roster turnover. LSU's roster, the one that Brian Kelly inherited from Ed Orgeron this past season, really only had about 7 to 8 key players who were recruited and signed by an Ed Orgeron staff. You could argue a few more, like Will Campbell committed to Ed Orgeron's staff, but he ends up signing under Brian Kelly's first sort of recruiting class. So LSU and even Notre Dame, like, you have a chance to overhaul your roster and improve upon what he received over the last 3 years. And LSU hasn't been able to capitalize on that enough. Certainly has tried, but has had some missteps over the first couple of years of Brian Kelly's tenure. The defensive staff clearly was not assembled the way that it needed to be early on. There was recruiting misses, and there was just the roster just was not where it needed to be for those sorts of reasons this past year. And LSU is now trying to sort of regroup and make this push toward 2025. Now, a lot of young players have gotten playing time over this last year, and you brought Garrett Nussmeier back and that sort of thing. But it's still that this is Brian Kelly's team now, and it hasn't taken that step forward. Just like while Notre Dame has a lot of players and was stronger foundationally at the time Marcus Freeman took over, and there are certainly quite a few key players on this team, on this Notre Dame team, that you're going to see on Monday night who were recruited by Brian Kelly and his staff. There's Marcus Freeman, by the same notion, has had time to make this his team. And in year 3, you really start to see it be your own team. And Marcus Freeman, I think, has that further along at least at this current moment. Long term, that might not be the case, but right now, Notre Dame is a little bit further ahead of LSU, and a little bit is maybe being generous. Simply, this is fact of the matter. They're in the national championship game. They have a chance to win a title on Monday night, and LSU has not come close to the playoff in Brian Kelly's 3 years.
I think both of you are right. Does that make sense? And I say that
as long as you say I'm among the right people. Yes, it makes sense.
I think Rab's
right
arguments. In part, I think 90% of the time I would fully agree with Wilson with the fact that you can flip your roster a lot easier in this day and age with the portal and NIL and all that. Thing is, at Notre Dame, it's not as easy to do that. They don't go into the portal as much because of the academic standards. It doesn't seem like they're as in on NIL as a concept because, again, they have very high academic standards. And it doesn't seem like they're necessarily in bidding wars for a lot of these top players. So they really, really have to rely on national recruiting. And so I'd say a lot of those guys, even if they didn't play under Brian Kelly, were probably at least pre-recruited by Brian Kelly. So talk like the 22 class or the 23 class. So I'd say that Notre Dame is a specific case where I'd say more of that team, if I at least had to guess, was recruited by the previous coach than most of these other major programs where the previous coach had a hand in building the roster that we see today after 2 or 3 years. But
it's not just the talent, though, is what I'm talking about. Wilson's point is well taken. But Wilson, it's also the culture, the expectation. Did Orgeron's players all have an individual nutrition plan? Probably, if they did, probably not to the extent that they do under Kelly. Were they as accountable for their time as Kelly's trying to make them? I think he left all these things. I'm sure Marcus Freeman has done some things on his own. Every coach puts their own stamp on a program, but I'm sure he's also retained some things, or some things have continued in just terms of momentum of the program that Kelly put in place. That's mainly what I'm talking about. Yeah, the personnel is going to turn over a lot. It's college athletics, but and especially now. But I think it's that culture, that expectation, that responsibility that had to be built up in the LSU program that kind of went out the door when Joe Burrow left after the 2019 season, and Kelly had to build that back up.
Well, to Koki's point about Notre Dame's transfers, yes, they do have a kind of a higher academic threshold. It's one of the things that Kelly talked about when he came to LSU was that, frankly, it should be easier to recruit at LSU than it is at Notre Dame, especially because of the local base that's just built into the ground around LSU, the number of NFL players that get produced in Louisiana. But Notre Dame has started taking on transfers. I mean, they had 9 in the 2024 class. You got quarterback Riley Leonard, who going to start on Monday. Big piece of this team. He's a transfer from Duke. You've got Mitch Jeter, the kicker, who's made some clutch kicks here in the postseason after kind of struggling during the year as he dealt with an injury. He's transferred from South Carolina. You've got others like that. And while they haven't necessarily been bringing in the number of transfers that like LSU has, where it currently has a class of 16. I mean, the year before that, they brought in 7. They've the last few years gone to the portal for quarterbacks with Sam Hartman and then Riley Leonard. And so I agree to an extent that is the case in Notre Dame, but they have used the portal. I think based on the reporting of Notre Dame beat writers up there, they have come around to some on NIL, more maybe over the past few years, and that Marcus Freeman has been able to maybe energize something. So, multiple things can be true at the same time, where Brian Kelly left him a good situation, but Marcus Freeman has been able to now take advantage of that situation, build upon it, and get Notre Dame to this place. And Brian Kelly just has not yet been able to fully take advantage of the things that LSU has to offer.
Exactly. Like there's a flip side to this, right? So you could say that, well, Brian Kelly left Marcus Freeman a really good foundation at Notre Dame, and Freeman's been able to sort of build on that. And part of what allows them to have that pretty good foundation, what makes that foundation very critical is the fact that Notre Dame isn't as, I guess, flexible as some of these other major schools like Oregon and Texas are in terms of building up their rosters, or an LSU. But the flip side of that is that, Brian Kelly had a very poor roster when he first took over the program, but it's just a lot easier for him to flip it, with the transfer portal, with the recent increases in NIL with LSU. So the argument that Kelly got a really raw deal when he showed up here doesn't reverberate as much when you have all transfer portal and NIL and all these other things.
I'd like to call this segment "Agreeing to an Extent." It pretty much sums it up. So, want to let you know that today's show is brought to you in part by Associated Grocers. Join our team and support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. Guys, let's wrap this up. We're going to come back and do predictions, because there is the small matter of, is Notre Dame actually going to win the national title, which I think sort of emphasizes maybe everything that we're saying here if they actually do win a national title before Brian Kelly even gets close at LSU. But any quick final thoughts on this, and then we'll wrap it up.
My other final thought would be that we're, as Brad said, can be prisoners of the moment sometimes. And when Brian Kelly took over at Notre Dame, over the previous 2 seasons, they were, I think, 7-6 and then like 6-6, something along those lines. Like, they were not a winning program. He inherited something and was able to revive it and turn it into a consistent winner when he was there, especially sort of the last, I think it was maybe last 4 or 5 years of his tenure there, where they made the college football playoff twice and just kept rattling off 10-win seasons. Now here in year 3, Marcus Freeman, same thing. He's got Notre Dame in the national title game. Notre Dame looks outmatched, as I think we'll discuss here more, somewhat similarly to how Notre Dame looked outmatched against Alabama. For this to actually, I think, carry the most weight, Marcus Freeman has to now get Notre Dame over where Brian Kelly had Notre Dame, which is winning a national championship. That was the thing that Notre Dame kept falling short of. He's also got to get to a point where he is not losing some of these games like Northern Illinois or Marshall, or some of these sort of random moments where Notre Dame, it's like that, they shouldn't be losing that game. He's got to continue to improve as a coach in a lot of ways as well. It's just sort of this current moment that we're in that Notre Dame is further along, and they've been winning these big games. And that's been the criticism of Kelly throughout his career, especially since he got to the Notre Dame level. Now LSU is consistently winning big games. He has to be able to do that to get LSU over the hump. And Notre Dame didn't have a major bowl win in the 30 plus years going into this postseason. And now they won the Sugar Bowl, they won the Orange Bowl, and now here they are at the national championship. And obviously the current system allows for that to happen in a way that didn't before, to play multiple bowl games in a year. But I was at the Sugar Bowl, and it seemed really cathartic for some of the fans who were there sitting around me, because they had not seen this in so long. And Marcus Freeman has been able to give them that, but he still has not gotten over the hump fully. And he might not on Monday night either. And until he fully gets over the hump, you can't, I think, say unequivocally that he has taken Notre Dame where Brian Kelly has not, and where Brian Kelly could not take Notre Dame, and where Brian Kelly has not yet taken LSU.
I agree, and I think it's fair to point out that the top of college football just isn't as strong as some of those teams that Notre Dame lost to, like that 2012 Alabama team. When this Ohio State team is playing as well as they have in a couple of these playoff games, yeah, sure, they're as good as some of those other great teams that won national championships or at least competed for them, like that 2012 Alabama team. But other than that, I don't think that Georgia team was quite as good as that Alabama team. I don't think that Penn State team was quite as good as the Alabama team. Not to try to totally discredit these Notre Dame wins, but it at least has to be pointed out, like their path to this national championship game, it hasn't been easy, but they aren't necessarily playing some of the best teams we've seen, some of these elite teams that we've seen in the sport over the past decade or so. So
I think you got to play, and they've also been so injured. The fact they've gotten this part with all the injuries that they have is something impressive. Sorry to cut you off, Koki, but I had to make that point.
No, absolutely, yeah, and I mean, like we've kind of been saying, there's a lot of nuance to this conversation. I'd say a lot of strong points as to pointing one way or the other. And I think like the prisoner of the moment prisoner of the moment, I think piece of this would be a little bit stronger if, say, LSU made the playoff last year, because then we'd say then there would be at least like proof of real success from Brian Kelly at LSU, even if they took a step back this season. But the fact that they took a half step back after being not that close to the playoff the first 2 years of his tenure, I think that now you kind of have a 3-year sample of what Marcus Freeman has done and a 3-year sample of what Brian Kelly has done, and it's hard to argue that Freeman's been less successful than Kelly during that time. Even if you want to say, oh, LSU plays a tougher schedule and whatnot. Well, the teams that Notre Dame were beating, one of them is an elite SEC team. So you can't really, it's just harder to make that argument now, given that we do have a somewhat of a sample size through 3 seasons.
Yeah, I don't think we're having this discussion if LSU made the playoff last year. I mean, if they've come close, also, I don't think we're having this discussion. But Rab, bring us home.
I talk about going back to the perception of the program. I hear so many people say, "Oh, this is a terrible season for LSU," and all that stuff. A little perspective is important. It wasn't a terrible season for LSU. It wasn't a great season. A terrible season was Florida State starting in the top 10 and going 2-10. A terrible season is Oklahoma State being a popular pick to win the Big 12, and they go winless in the Big 12. That's a terrible season. Okay, LSU is 29-11 under Brian Kelly. They've won all 3 of their bowl games. For the Heisman Trophy winner, they won the SEC West when they were still in SEC West. There've been some good things on his ledger, and it hasn't been terrible. Has it been super great? No, but it hasn't been terrible. The problem is, of course, that the standard here is so high. As been said, the last 3 coaches, Saban, Miles, and Orgeron, won national championships. That's the expectation here for Brian Kelly, and he knew that coming here. I mean, that's the challenge he said he wanted, along with the $9.5 million a year. But it was it was the challenge he wanted, and he felt that he wasn't getting there at Notre Dame, which he left as their all-time winning coach. But to that extent, there've also been some failures. They wasted Jaden Daniels and that historically great offense in 2023, coupling it. It was dragged down by the anchor of that terrible defense, and he had to fire the whole defensive staff, and they had the special teams was almost as abysmal in 2022. He had to get rid of or encourage Brian Polian maybe to find another form of employment, and now they're kind of having to kind of reinvent the program. And like I've said in the column recently, it's been whack-a-mole a little bit. Yeah, they fix one problem, another problem crops up, and another problem crops up, and eventually you got to make progress. And this, I think we all agreed this is going to be a critical year for Brian Kelly and for LSU. And I definitely think it is. I don't think he's anywhere. Maybe the seat is I don't know, got Wilson and Koki getting a little warm, but it's not hot at this point. I wouldn't say, but this is a critical year. If they go 7-5 in 2025, well, yeah, maybe people aren't as supportive with the collective, and maybe the recruits aren't as responsive and stuff like that. So it's a big year for LSU and Brian Kelly, but it hasn't been a failure yet. And I think again that's some of that perception that is out there that Brian Kelly has failed so far at LSU. Just because in year 3 at other schools he was supposed to, there was this big, big improvement or big, huge season. Didn't happen this year for LSU, but it doesn't mean that it can't. And I think we're in an era in college football now where it's more like college basketball or college baseball, where you can with making a few changes, with getting the right personnel in and getting them to blend together, come together and have a much better season than you had the year before. The portal allows you to do that. So we'll see.
I think Rab makes a very important point where you can't have this conversation until you define what's success at Notre Dame and what's success at LSU. And that sort of colors the perception of this entire debate, right? Because success at Notre Dame is what is not just making the playoff, but then exceeding it is what they've been doing the last, month or so. At LSU, success is at the very least making the playoff. I'd say the bar is, a little bit higher at a place like LSU when you've won 3 national championships in 20 years than at a place like Notre Dame, which hasn't won the title since 88? 1988. Yeah. So I think that definitely colors the conversation here and definitely puts, Marcus Freeman in a really good light, given the fact that they're in the national championship game right now.
Yeah, that's probably a good place to end. I think it's all great points. If you enjoyed the discussion, leave your comments in the YouTube section, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit the like button while you're down there. We appreciate it. I do think, guys, this is probably more vindication for Notre Dame than it is any sort of like a verdict on how Brian Kelly has done at LSU. Like, if you're a Notre Dame fan, you can say, yes, our program can succeed even with coaches leaving and things like that, which is something we never thought could happen. And Notre Dame has overcome that. But for LSU, they're on a different track. And again, they've got to win on their own. So we'll come back.
If you hate Brian Kelly, this is a delightful little bonus. Notre Dame's success.
It's an echo chamber. You're gonna hear what you want to hear out of it. So let's take our last break, and when we come back, we will do our predictions on whether Notre Dame will actually win that national championship, which also factors into this discussion. So we'll be right back after this.
Experience the convenience and cleanliness that Waste Pro brings to Mardi Gras, LSU tailgates, and festivals with our top-notch portable toilet services. Perfect for large crowds and community events. Join the countless satisfied families and organizers who trust Waste Pro to keep their gatherings spotless and sanitary. Discover more about our services and make your next event a success at wasteprousa.com.
You know how far I've gone, now I'm home again. I'm feeling more alive these days than I've ever been.
At the Baton Rouge Clinic, our sole focus is to provide exceptional health care for your entire family so that you can get back to doing what you love most. We are caring for generations.
You give me love.
Since 1988, Classic Industrial Services, Inc. has led the industry in specialty contracting. From thermal insulation to scaffolding, coatings, and beyond, we cover it all. Every minute matters in our commitment to quality and safety. We're here to serve with roofing, siding, heat trace, and refractory services. Visit classicindustrial.com for more information.
Welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Classic Industrial Services, proudly serving Louisiana and the entire United States. From large capital projects to commercial projects or your smaller quick response needs, Classic Industrial is your go-to for quality and safety. They're not just about business, they're a proud community partner, supporting local initiatives and helping build a stronger Baton Rouge. Because at Classic Industrial Services, every minute matters. Okay. We talked about Notre Dame getting to the national title game, and Rab, you brought up that is something that Brian Kelly did while he was at Notre Dame, and he got crushed in the national title game, which is part of the conversation around this. Now, when we look at Monday night's game, that's certainly a possibility. I think it's Notre Dame, Ohio State. It's 6:30 p.m. Monday in Atlanta, and let's just go into the betting line here. The Buckeyes are 8.5-point favorites. The Notre Dame's almost 3-1 on the money line, so they're pretty big underdogs here. Like, there's a legitimate possibility, and we'll get to our predictions in a minute. But there's a legitimate possibility, Wilson, this goes really poorly for Notre Dame, just like it did under Brian Kelly.
When Ohio State plays to its level of talent, as we saw in the Rose Bowl and in their first-round game against Tennessee, they're the best team in the country. The problem with the season was that they weren't always playing to the level of their talent. And we saw that even in little moments against Texas. There were some self-inflicted mistakes there, some penalties that caused them some issues. And if Ohio State sort of shoots itself in the foot a few times, then this game can stay close into the second half. But Notre Dame, it's admirable that they have gotten this far with the number of injuries that they have. They've been able to shake them off and keep going, and guys have stepped up. But it feels like in this game, it's going to finally kind of catch up to them. Ohio State has such a high level of talent, especially on the offensive side. It's going to be fascinating to see if Notre Dame continues to play a lot of man coverage. That's what they like to do. The teams that have played a lot of man coverage against Ohio State typically get burned by Jeremiah Smith and those other receivers. And I feel like that's what's going to happen enough here for Ohio State to have a comfortable win. I still think that Notre Dame's defense is going to be able to do some good things. That is a unit that I've been impressed by all year. They're really sound. They fly downhill, and Xavier Watson in the back end, and has been really impressive. But they've lost so many guys like Mills and Benjamin Morrison and others who are key players on this team. And so I think that Ohio State, while Notre Dame might be able to keep it close for a little while, is going to be able to pull away in the second half.
Yeah.
Before we go ahead, Koki.
Yeah, I just don't really see how Notre Dame's going to score enough points to keep up with Ohio State and just their explosiveness on offense. Kind of echoing what Wilson said, but looking at the flip side of the ball a little bit too. I like Riley Leonard a little bit more than some other people do, but and I think he's like a huge asset for them with his legs, especially. But they don't have enough explosive playmakers on the outside to really lift up his level of play, and he kind of has to be perfect for them to win this game. So that's just asking a lot from your quarterback in a matchup like this against this good of a team and this potentially good of an offense.
Definitely. Again, any team that gets to this point, deserves a lot of credit. I'm going to say, Koki said earlier how Notre Dame won the the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl in the same year. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that the team is in the playoff is winning two of these long-time bowls in the same year. But that's where we are. But Ohio State had the tougher path. I mean, Tennessee. Remember when people were saying after they lost to Michigan, boy, it might be good if Ohio State went on the road for their first round playoff game instead of playing at home. The atmosphere could be that bad. They could turn on the team that quickly, and they just came out and pounded Tennessee. Then they went and pounded Oregon. Got to be one of the more impressive wins, if not the most impressive win of the season for any team. Ohio State's win in the Rose Bowl, and then beat a very good Texas team in the Cotton Bowl. Notre Dame beat Indiana at home, which people are questioning, do they even belong in the playoff? Beat Georgia without Carson Beck, and beat Penn State, which just can't hardly ever win a big game. So I give Ohio State I give Notre Dame a puncher's chance because they got here and they had to get here. They're obviously playing with confidence, and they've got some ability and you can't discount a team that gets here. But I think they're deserving of their big underdog status for sure in this one.
Hey, you may be able to tell where we're leaning, but we'll do our predictions here. First, Tiger fans want to let you know you can catch all the sports action at the Queen Casino's DraftKings Sportsbook Bar and 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails. With top-notch screens and live betting, it's the ultimate spot to watch your favorite teams and enjoy a cold brew or a signature cocktail. The Queen Casino is the only land-based casino in Baton Rouge, and it's your go-to for game day or any day. Visit today and elevate your sports watching experience. Okay, you can leave your predictions in the YouTube comments on our LSU Tigers at NOLA.com YouTube channel. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button while you're down there. And we'll get this started. I think, let's see, the way I have this set up, Koki, we have your pick coming up first. So let us have it.
Yeah, I'm going with Ohio State winning 34-20. I could easily see this being a blowout. I could easily see this being a very close game. It kind of depends on which Ohio State source shows up, right? Because we could get the Ohio State that we saw in the Texas game, and I think if we get that team, then we're going to get a pretty close game. Because I think this Notre Dame team is better than that Texas team because of all the problems on offense, especially that Texas team had, and Quinn Ewers' inconsistencies, Quinn Ewers' inability to extend plays with his legs, Texas's inability to consistently run the ball effectively. The fact that outside of Matthew Golden, they didn't have a ton of reliable weapons, a lot of young guys who are talented, but weren't quite reliable. They had all these sort of issues that we definitely saw against Arizona State. And we saw again against Ohio State. And yet it was a one-score game late in the fourth quarter. And I think a lot had to do with just the inconsistencies that we've seen from Ohio State this season. For the most part, they've been able to pull out these games anyway, except unless they're facing Michigan or Oregon on the road. But I think that I just think that Ohio State has too many advantages, despite the fact that they're really inconsistent. They've just too many advantages for me not to pick them in this game. And again, like as Wilson said, if they play like they did against Oregon, they're going to win this game by at least 3 scores. So this is less of a indictment against Notre Dame and more of just saying that Ohio State's just that good when they're playing at their best.
Yeah, I'll go next, and I have Ohio State winning 28-17. I have enough respect for Notre Dame to say they're going to fight hard and stick around and find a way to make this close. Maybe Ohio State gets a late score to put it away, but I do think Ohio State just superior talent in the way they're playing right now. Can't pick against them. Scott Rabalais, you're up next.
I want to see a close game. I mean, we've had 2 games in the college football playoff decided by less than a touchdown, less than 10 points, right? The Peach Bowl, Texas beat Arizona State, sorry, Koki, and Notre Dame's win over Penn State in the Orange Bowl, which was a very good game. But I'm afraid we're not going to see it. I'm going with a double-digit win, too. I'm going with Ohio State 31-19. I think Ohio State's got to help Notre Dame to win this game. They got to play at less than their best, like they did against Michigan, or make some middle errors like they did against Oregon out in Eugene. But if they're playing like they've played most of the time in this playoff, I don't think Notre Dame stands that much of a chance. I think they're the superior team talent-wise, across the board in general. Obviously, Notre Dame has some very good players too, but I see Jack Sawyer dotting the I with Riley Leonard and just kind of dominating this game. And maybe I'm being kind to Notre Dame with the score, but maybe because I want to see a closer game. But I think Ohio State wins pretty comfortably. And then I hope Ryan Day lifts the trophy with one hand and then the other hand grabs the mic and said, "I'm leaving. I'm going to the Dallas Cowboys. You didn't appreciate me? Bye."
Yeah, I'll put my money against that one. Okay, so we're 3 for 3. Ohio State. Wilson, bring us home. Is the jinx in full?
It is in full. I wish that I could save the graphic, but Penn State and Notre Dame played an extremely close game, and Penn State did not complete a pass to a receiver. Ohio State's probably going to do that pretty darn quick with Jeremiah Smith and Ibuka and all of those guys. They have so much speed and athleticism on the offensive side that I have a great deal of respect for Notre Dame's defense. That's why I picked Ohio State to score about 27 in this game. And I can see a scenario in which Ohio State kind of has some of those mistakes, self-inflicted penalties and things like that hold them back from maybe turning this into a full-fledged blowout like they did against Oregon. But they have so much firepower on the offensive side, and Notre Dame does not have the firepower in its offense to score enough in this game against a really good Ohio State defense. And so I've got Ohio State winning, and unfortunately the jinx is on as a result.
All right, we'll see if Ohio State can overcome the advocate jinx here. But we've all got Ohio State winning all by double digits, all covering the 8.5 point spread. So maybe go bet that Notre Dame plus 8.5, and we'll see what happens. All right, guys, appreciate the conversation. Hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you for watching the LSU Sports Insider podcast. We'll be back with some basketball talk next week. Of course, LSU women against South Carolina is the headliner there, and we'll be your one-stop shop all year long for LSU podcasts. So for Scott Rabalais, Koki Riley, and Wilson Alexander, I'm Zach Ewing. Thanks for watching the LSU Sports Insider.